Clerk will read the order of the day.
General business, notice number 2, standing in the name of Ms Uibo, to move a motion concerning underground power in the northern suburbs.
I call the member for Arnhem.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I move that this Assembly recognises the importance of rolling out high-voltage underground power in the northern suburbs to deliver more reliable and safe electricity for residents, schools and businesses, particularly over the wet season, and condemns the 𝙎𝙃𝙈𝙀𝙃𝙊𝙍𝙃 government for failing to tell Territorians before the 2024 election of its plans to scrap the 10-year program to underground power to the northern suburbs. Madam Speaker, this motion goes to the heart of what Territorians expect from their government: honesty, responsibility and a basic commitment to keeping our communities safe. Today I stand with the residents, families and small businesses right across Darwin's northern suburbs who have been blindsided by their local members, let down and frankly betrayed by the CLP government with their decision to walk away from undergrounding high-voltage power rollout in 13 suburbs across Darwin. Madam Speaker, this is a project that should have been above politics, a project that any government who is serious about cyclone resilience, infrastructure planning and community safety would see through to completion. But instead of delivering, the CLP has dumped it. They've scrapped a program that was already funded, already designed and ready to roll out, and they've done so in the most cynical and dishonest way imaginable to Territorians. And make no mistake, Madam Speaker, they had a plan to axe this project before the 2024 election, but they didn't have the guts to tell Territorians they were going to do that. No, there was no announcement in their pre-election budget fiscal outlook. So if you haven't heard of that, CLP members, go back and have a look. It is a requirement before any Northern Territory election that the government of the day and the opposition of the day have their pre-election budgets costed, not just on the back of an envelope or a scrappy napkin, but costed by the Department of Treasury and Finance in the Northern Territory. So it's not made-up figures, it's not made-up numbers, it is actually costed. So each major party, the government of the day, the opposition of the day, has to do this process. They go to the Northern Territory general election with their budgets. So, Madam Speaker, it was not costed as being removed, reduced or taken out of the CLP's, then opposition, pre-election budget before the 2024 election in August. Madam Speaker, there was no word of this in the budget reply. Then, just months after forming government, there was barely an hour's notice to the media, and the Treasurer, Bill Yan, stood up and told Territorians that the $60 million allocation to the underground power was gone. Not delayed, not redesigned, not just gone, not even going through a budget cabinet process. Madam Speaker, let's be crystal clear about what this means. It means that residents in 𝙎𝙃𝙈𝙀𝙊𝙍𝙃, Waggaman, Larrakia, Allawa, the Narrows, Fanny Bay, Jingley, Moyle, Stewart Park, Coconut Grove, Ludmilla, Parap and the Gardens will remain connected to an ageing overhead power network that is completely exposed to the extreme weather events of the top end. Madam Speaker, it means that the lessons of Cyclone Marcus, which in the past left over 29,000 Territory homes without power, are being ignored by the CLP government. And it also means that the safety and comfort of the thousands of families across Darwin have been sacrificed so that the CLP can fund its own political priorities, which has no plan. And this is not responsible governing or budgeting. It is reckless politics at its worst, and Territorians are being left in the dark and to bear the cost. And let's go back to the beginning, Madam Speaker. This underground power rollout wasn't just a back-of-the-envelope idea. It was carefully planned, staged, long-term infrastructure program designed to improve power reliability, to reduce repair times and to protect public safety when it comes to cyclone-prone areas in Darwin. And the former Labor government had the $60 million committed over the 3 years to begin the rollout in 𝙎𝙃𝙈𝙀𝙊𝙍𝙃, Waggaman and Larrakia. the first step in a 10-year plan to underground high voltage power across 13 suburbs. Madam Speaker, the design work had been completed, procurement was underway, and construction was due to begin. This was real progress, real planning, real delivery, and real outcomes for our community, and frankly, should have come sooner. And the reasons for doing this were as strong as ever when it came to protecting power in Darwin, our capital, of course, but the major city in the Northern Territory, our capital. Madam Speaker, after Cyclone Marcus, we saw what happens when power poles come down and days and sometimes weeks without electricity for many of our Territory families who experienced that, including our businesses. Fridges were full of spoiled food. Homes had no fans, no aircon. There was no way to stay cool in that hot humidity and the build-up of the cyclone season. It was also considered a health crisis. It was a significant economic blow to families and small businesses right across the top end, and it was a sharp and painful reminder of just how vulnerable our overhead power network really is, particularly when we have ageing infrastructure. Madam Speaker, that is why Labor restarted the underground power program. That is why we completed the works at 9 Darwin schools first, including Waggaman Primary, Moyle Primary and Jingli, and that's why we committed to extending that work into residential suburbs. And the schools we did first, Madam Speaker, because they were always, and they still are, recognised as those cyclone shelters, those cyclone safety places. If someone wants to go to, if they don't feel comfortable in their own home or they may be visiting, then those schools act as emergency cyclone shelters. But what did the CLP do, Madam Speaker? They cancelled it. They tore up the plan, they scrapped the funding, and they pretended it was not real. They claimed the project was not scoped, despite the fact that civil works procurement had been scheduled, designs were underway in the 3 suburbs I mentioned, and the community consultation was about to commence. They claimed the project was too expensive, even though the $60 million commitment was already budgeted and accounted for. And they claimed that they would, quote, maybe, Madam Speaker, look at it again if the budget improves. Well, Madam Speaker, that's a promise as hollow as any other commitment that we've seen so far by the CLP when it comes to the people of the Northern Suburbs. And let me remind the Parliament, Madam Speaker, of something else. This is not the first time the CLP has scrapped underground power. They did it before when they were in government in 2012. And I know I had a dig previously about the past, but this is what happens when these bad habits start to creep into a pattern of behaviour for the CLP, Madam Speaker. In 2012, when the CLP was last in government, they stopped the rollout of work for undergrounding high voltage, which had been already completed in Nightcliff, Milner, Rapid Creek and Coconut Grove. The decision left more than a dozen suburbs unprotected when Cyclone Marcus hit in 2018. We saw the consequences. Again, that short-sightedness and lack of planning by the CLP has crept in again. And now, instead of learning from their mistakes, Madam Speaker, the CLP has just repeated them. The suburbs affected include Nakara, Waggaman, Allawa, Larrakia, the Narrows, Fanny Bay, Moyle, Jingli, Stewart Park, Coconut Grove, Ludmilla, Parap and the Gardens. 13 suburbs in total, all left hanging in the wind. All in CLP electorates, Madam Speaker. They did not go out and tell the constituents of those suburbs that this was their plan. Absolutely not. They all found out after the Territory election. And Madam Speaker, these are working communities full of families, pensioners, renters, small business owners, and those who rely on the government to do the basics, to plan ahead, to protect infrastructure, and to put community safety first. And Madam Speaker, they are the same people who were told by this government that they would fix essential services and live within its means. Instead, they got secrecy, spin and abandonment. The Treasurer says he will now approach the federal government for funding, but not before he scrapped the project, not before he pulled the plug, not before he disregarded the plans that were already underway, and not before he broke the trust of every voter who believed that the CLP had a normal government plan to underground high voltage. Maybe he should have just stayed out fishing, Madam Speaker. And as for the numbers, the so-called budget savings of $115 million from cancelling this project and then $19 million around cancelling the convention centre upgrade, well, the numbers simply do not add up, Madam Speaker. Even basic media scrutiny has shown that the CLP cannot explain where the rest of the money has come from. They cannot explain how scrapping a $60 million project saves more than double that amount, and that is very scary. And they certainly cannot explain how leaving communities at risk is a better use of taxpayer funds than investing in the basic infrastructure that Territorians deserve. Madam Speaker, this is a motion is more about more than one project. It is about the character of this government and the credibility of the CLP, which cannot be trusted. Madam Speaker, when a government says one thing before an election and does another afterwards, it is a betrayal of Territorians' trust. When it cancels infrastructure projects in cyclone-prone communities while splashing money on a do-nothing territory coordinator and political deals, it is a shirking of responsibility and duty. And when it comes to turning its back on people who most need it, who most need the help, who need to be respected, the CLP loses all rights to call itself a government for all Territorians. A government for some Territorians, I think they could extend themselves to that, but definitely not a government for all Territorians. Labor will continue to stand up for the people of Darwin's northern suburbs. We believe that underground power is essential and it does affect the Darwin to Katherine system as well, Madam Speaker. We believe it should be delivered suburb by suburb, the step by step, like the 10-year plan had coordinated. And we believe the government should honour this commitment to Territorians and not hide from them, or at least be upfront and go and tell them before you're going to do it. Madam Speaker, to the people of 𝙎𝙃𝙈𝙀𝙎𝙏, 𝙎𝙃𝙈𝙀𝙎 and every suburb that I mentioned who is going to be left behind by the CLP government, we say we are sorry that the government was not upfront and honest with you, but our Territory Labor opposition is here to support you. And we will not stop fighting until the lights stay on, the power stays safe, and the promises that were made to you are finally kept. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Nightcliff.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to speak in favour of this motion, which calls on this Assembly to recognise the critical importance of underground power infrastructure and to condemn the Whanokēaro CLP government's betrayal of Territorians on this issue. So let me be clear what's happened here. The CLP went to the 2024 election without telling Territorians that they planned to scrap the $290 million 10-year underground power program. This was a deliberate deception of the electorate. They knew this program was important to communities across Darwin's northern suburbs, yet they stayed silent, only announcing its cancellation after taking office in what they euphemistically called a budget savings measure. Now, Nightcliff and Rapid Creek have their power undergrounded, but my constituents in Coconut Grove are still waiting. These residents are still living with the daily reality of above-ground power lines that leave them vulnerable to every wet season, every storm and every cyclone that threatens our top end. And this issue goes far beyond simple infrastructure. It's about building climate-resilient communities for the future. Darwin sits, obviously, in one of Australia's most cyclone-prone regions, and climate change is intensifying these threats, making extreme weather events and cyclones more severe. When Cyclone Marcus hit in 2018, it was a relatively modest Cat 2 storm. It left 28,000 homes without power, some for weeks, in Coconut Grove, and over 400 power lines were brought down. Schools couldn't open, businesses couldn't operate, and families were left in Darwin's oppressive heat and humidity without electricity, or in many cases, even telephone service. International research from the International Energy Agency confirms that underground transmission and distribution systems are significantly less vulnerable to climate hazards than above-ground infrastructure. When extreme weather events occur, underground systems enable fast recovery and maintain essential services that communities depend on. We've seen this story before, Madam Speaker. After Cyclone Tracy devastated Darwin 50 years ago, we rebuilt with stronger building codes and better planning. Yet here we are, half a century later, still failing to learn the fundamental lesson: prevention is better than reconstruction. Other research by the IEA has demonstrated that for every dollar invested in climate-resilient infrastructure, $6 can be saved in recovery costs. It's about more than just convenience. It's about community resilience, economic continuity, and ensuring our most vulnerable residents aren't left without power during our most challenging weather events. This isn't the first time a CLP government has abandoned the underground power program. The project began under Labor in 2004, made progress through the 2000s, but was put on hold by CLP in 2012 under Terry Mills, who simply said they didn't have the funds. Sound familiar? Labor restarted the program again after 2016, recognising its importance for community safety and resilience. The suburbs left waiting, including part of my electorate, are filled with families, schools and businesses who deserve the same level of resilience and reliability that other Darwin suburbs already enjoy. This is about recognising that infrastructure investments aren't just line items in a budget. They're investments in our community's future resilience and our capacity to thrive in a changing climate. As we face an uncertain climate future with more intense wet seasons and more severe storm events, the question isn't whether we can afford to underground our power infrastructure, it's whether we can afford not to. The residents of the northern suburbs deserve honesty from their government and infrastructure that works when they need it most. They deserve a government that plans for the future rather than one that breaks promises and abandons essential resilience projects. I commend this motion to the Assembly and call on members to support it. Our community's safety and resilience depend on it. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Are there any more speakers? Member for Johnston.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, underground power is an issue that matters deeply to the people in my electorate. I'm lucky enough to live in Milner, where we have underground power, but the other 3 suburbs do not. And they know too well the risk of power outages from extreme weather here in Darwin. We just heard some of that from the member for Nightcliff, the heavy costs that come with them, and they also have felt the weight of broken promises, and it's one of the issues that's raised with me over and over again. People talk to me about their concern about cyclones growing stronger. We saw after Cyclone Marcus in 2018, nearly 29,000 homes lost power, many for over a week. And that's not just an inconvenience, it's dangerous. Families enduring scorching heat without any way to cool it, without refrigeration, some without running water, schools and businesses closed, vulnerable people and people with health issues suffering the most. And in times like these, communities need to be able to rely on their government to have the infrastructure in place to keep power flowing and to support recovery. And we know that one proven way to address this and improve extreme weather resilience is by undergrounding power times, especially in older suburbs like mine, where residents have waited an incredibly long time for upgrades that were promised and have never been delivered. We know underground power won't stop storms, but it can prevent the damage that comes from them, the widespread, long, sometimes weeks-long power outages. We know it reduces clean-up costs, we know it protects homes and businesses, we know it keeps critical services running, and we know, most importantly of all, that it keeps people safe. So why aren't we doing it? The government says it can't afford it, that $60 million won't go far enough. But every dollar spent on preparedness saves multiple dollars in recovery. It's not about whether we can afford it, it's about whether we have the vision to prioritise it. If we can spend $500 million on prison, we can invest a fraction of that on underground power. It also raises the question which people ask me about what is this government's plan to address the growing risks from climate change and extreme weather. This goes way beyond power lines. It's about building a safer, smarter, more sustainable and more affordable future for all of us. Underground power is just one part of that puzzle. There are many other smart, community-focused upgrades that can build resilience and fairness into our energy system. It's really positive that Power and Water have conditional approval to install community batteries in Darwin and Katherine, and this hopefully will help lower bills, stabilise the grid and allow more homes and businesses to benefit from solar power. And these kind of practical community-centred approaches should be central to our energy planning. We have enormous solar potential, but it requires political will and investment to unlock. It's not a pipe dream. Places like South Australia and the ACT demonstrate that clean, reliable and affordable power is possible, and with wise planning, Darwin can lead here too. So we don't have to choose between reliability and renewables, and we don't have to choose between people's welfare. And my battery just went flat, so I'll just have to make up the rest of it. I want to stand here and say to my community, I know this is an issue that's really important to you. It's an issue that, as I said, you've raised with me over and over again. I know you're concerned about what's going to happen as we soon start going into the wet season and into the threat of cyclones. We've heard the government say there's no money for it, but there's plenty of money for other things. Let's invest wisely up front so we save money, we look after people in the long term. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Are there any more speakers? Treasurer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And it's interesting that this has come back today after the discussions we actually had on it yesterday. And I'm happy to stand here and speak to this again, because yet again we have the opposition here trying to rewrite history, gaslight Territorians, and actually I think they're trying to mislead this House and also mislead the people of the Northern Territory. Because in the motion it says, condemn the 𝙎𝙃𝙈𝙀𝙎𝙏𝙇 government for failing to tell Territorians before the 2024 election of its plans to scrap the 10-year program to underground power in the northern suburbs. And I thought I was pretty clear on that yesterday, Madam Speaker. And I think if you go back and have a look at Hansard, you can actually read what I said, but I'll say it again. Nobody on this side of the House and nobody in this government made commitments to undergrounding power in the northern suburbs. The fact that Labor is saying that we did is a falsehood. It is not true, Madam Speaker. It was Labor's plan to do it. Now, as I said yesterday, and I'll say it again today, within 6 to 8 weeks after being appointed as a minister and being the shareholding minister for Power and Water, I had my first meeting with, I believe it was the CEO and the chair of the Power and Water Board, along with some of the other executives. And during that meeting, Madam Speaker, they came to me and said, we cannot do the undergrounding of power for $60 million that Labor had been pushing. They said, we can't do it. We need to stop it. We can't do it. There is more work that needs to be done. All right? 6 to 8 weeks after the election, Madam Speaker. Not prior to the election. No promises from anybody. This was Labor's election commitment. I actually have a press release from the Leader of the Opposition when she was responsible for this back in 2020. And I'll speak to that a little bit later, and I'll probably table that, Madam Speaker, so people have it. But it wasn't our commitment. And for the Leader of the Opposition and those opposite to say that it is, as I reiterate, a falsehood. It is not true. Yes, I made the decision to cease the undergrounding of power because there was only $60 million allocated to it. And again, I'll go back through the history like I did yesterday. So the background, the previous government had said they'd allocated $60 million in their last budget for undergrounding of only the high voltage network, Madam Speaker, not the HV and LV, but only the HV network in 𝙎𝙃𝙈𝙀𝙎𝙏𝙁, and 𝙎𝙗𝙗𝑚. And this was reprioritised by our government. Okay, the previous government costed fully undergrounding the power for the northern suburbs at $290 million. Now, when I went back to Power and Water the first time, after I said they asked me and requested me to cease, and I agreed to it and stopped it. I said, go away and give me some indicative costs on how much what it will take to actually do. And their first indicative price came back to me at over $500 million, Madam Speaker. And the caveat on that, Madam Speaker, was that you had to, for economies of scale, to make it cost effective, you had to underground the HV and the LV together. Again, here we have, and it says, I believe, in this press release, it's only going to be the HV network. And since then, Power and Water have continued to do work on what it will actually take to underground all the power, because you have to do it together, otherwise it will cost probably 50 to 60% more. To underground all the power in the 13 suburbs in the northern suburbs is nearly $1 billion. Okay, $1 billion. Now, I agree that undergrounding the power is, of course, a good idea to do because of the weather events that we have here in the top end. I have no issues with that, but we need to come up with $1 billion to do it, and a very, very comprehensive and staged plan to be able to do that. Now, if we went ahead and did it, like Labor want us to do. Let's go and spend $1 billion and underground the power through the northern suburbs. Happy days, off we go. Well, who pays for it, Madam Speaker? Do I have to go and borrow $1 billion? Because that's what Labor used to do. I think, as I said yesterday, they came, they spent, and they borrowed. And that's why we find ourselves in the debt position we are today, because they just went ahead and did things without considering the cost. If we can come up with an appropriate plan that is robust, is fully costed, and we're able to come up with the money to underground the power, then so be it. I'd certainly back that. But I've got to find the $1 billion first. So if we have a look at this press release from the former minister responsible for essential services, I believe, Minister Uibo at the time, now the Leader of the Opposition. It said, 𝙎𝙃𝙈𝙀𝙎, Wagamon and 𝙎𝙃𝙈 are programmed to be the first of Darwin's northern suburbs to have the HV overhead infrastructure power lines undergrounded. The rollout is part of the Territory Labor Government's $60 million investment over 6 years to underground Darwin's power network. And there's a chronicle order of the 13 suburbs. And guess what, Madam Speaker? Works were supposed to commence in 2023-24 in Nakara, and then commence works in Wagamon and 𝙎𝙃𝙈 in 24-25. Now, is this just a glossy press release, Madam Speaker? Did they really plan to do it? Or did they actually realise that they couldn't do it because they didn't have the money, and that's why it never progressed? And one thing I've always asked myself, Madam Speaker, about this is the fact that the CEO and the executives from Paramount, along with members of that board, were, I suppose, brave enough to say to me, we can't do this. We can't do it for the money. We should stop. And I actually listened to them, Madam Speaker, because I realised that it was a little bit of a pipe dream, a bit of a fallacy. But I wonder, Madam Speaker, was that same advice from Power and Water given to the Labor Party? And as usual, like they've done with so many projects, just gone, we're not going to accept the advice of the experts, we're just going to plough ahead anyway, and it'll cost what it'll cost, and we'll just go out and we'll borrow the money and we'll put Territorians in more debt just to pull it off. It really does boggle the mind, Madam Speaker. And I also wonder if the Leader of the Opposition is bringing this because it's her name on this press release. And I certainly know that the previous member for Casuarina was running around, I believe, during the lead up to the election, telling all the people out in that area that they were going to get all their power undergrounded for $60 million. It was never going to happen, Madam Speaker. It was an absolute fallacy and it was an absolute pipe dream. And of course, Territory Labor, the opposition, again, are trying to rewrite history and are saying that we made this decision before the election, which is absolute garbage, Madam Speaker. Absolute garbage. I made the decision, I stick my hand up for it, and I made it many months after the election because the people, the experts who know the system, know what it costs, came to me and said that we cannot do it. If you like, Madam Speaker, I will table this press release. Nakara first cab off the rank for Darwin's underground project from 29 March 2023.
Is leave granted to table this paper? All in favour say aye. It is supported.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Because this contains quite a bit of information that I think the people in the northern suburbs would probably like to know. Because the previous government have been gaslighting them for years. The money was never there to be able to do this project. And of course, the Leader of the Opposition was talking about some of the reprioritisations and savings that we made leading into the election, and she mentioned the convention centre upgrade. Well, I'd like to just touch on that. That convention centre upgrade was part of another dream that was probably going to land Territorians in even more debt around bringing a basketball team to Darwin and basing them here. And the money that Labor had put up for that, when you actually looked into the overall cost, again, it was not costed correctly. And it's the same with the underground power, Madam Speaker. It seems a little bit like Labor's typical accounting. $60 million that allocated to do the underground power, and then, well, I suppose if you look at some of their other press releases, they've got another figure of $290 million. Well, Madam Speaker, that's only $710 million short. I'll repeat that, $710 million short of what it would actually take to do the task and to do it properly. So we've seen that in previous budgets, so I don't know what sort of calculator. I did find a calculator in a drawer of my office when I moved in, Madam Speaker, and I knew that it was a Labor calculator, so I quickly threw it in the bin because I knew that it doesn't work. Because I've seen what they did with their calculators, Madam Speaker. 1 and 1 doesn't seem to equal 2. It might equal 10,000 or 1 million. And again, it beggars belief that Labor have come into this House yet again and are trying to rewrite history on undergrounding of power. Yes, undergrounding of power, I suppose, will happen at some stage, and I think it probably does need to happen. But it's a little bit like our renewables targets here in the Territory. We know it's something that we need to do. It's the right thing to do, Madam Speaker, but we will do it in an economically responsible way. I cannot, in all good conscience, go out and say to the people of the Northern Suburbs tomorrow, OK, I'm going to underground your power, but I'm going to go away and I'm going to borrow $1 billion to do it, because that's what it would take, Madam Speaker, unless the feds are going to stump up the money, and I don't see them doing that in a hurry. So there's two options there, Madam Speaker. I borrow $1 billion and I put us another $1 billion in debt. And then we look at the interest repayments on that debt into the future and what our children and our grandchildren will have to pay to service that debt. Or the other option is then we have to change the bills for the people in the Northern Suburbs to cover the cost of undergrounding that power. And I believe the back of an envelope calculations would be in excess of $1,000 per year to pay for that undergrounding of power. And what does that say to the rest of the Territory who want things as well? What we need to do for the Territory needs to be to the benefit of all Territorians. And yes, I think the people of the Northern Suburbs will, at some stage in the future, need to see that undergrounding of power. And like services across our remote communities in Alice Springs and our other towns in Tennant Creek and Katherine also need works done too. And we have to prioritise those, but it comes down to the budget, Madam Speaker. We need the money to be able to do these things. We need to have them costed properly, not like we've seen here from Labor with $60 million that was going to do it all, and that's what they were telling people in the Northern Suburbs, or $290 million for all 13 suburbs. The numbers just do not stack up. They just do not stack up. So, really, it's not unsurprising that the opposition want to keep talking about the undergrounding of power, because really all it was back in the day from the previous government was just talk. They never properly funded it. They put out a press release, which I've tabled now, that said they were going to start in 23, 24 and never actually started the job, because I believe that they knew they didn't have the money, it wasn't costed properly, wasn't planned properly, and they were just telling the people in the Northern Suburbs that they were going to do it, knowing full well that they were not going to be able to do it. And of course, I think Labor lost the Northern Suburbs because they didn't fight for them in government. But all of a sudden they're back out there trying to fight for them now through this motion before the House around the undergrounding of power. Well, Madam Speaker, I can tell the opposition it's too little, too late. You weren't listening to the Northern Suburbs in the years leading up to the election in 2024. And I think the people of the Northern Suburbs can probably see right through you now with what you're trying to do. Because if you were serious about undergrounding the power in the Northern Suburbs, and you were serious about the people in the northern suburbs. You would have started it when you said you were going to start it back in 2023. It's like Territory Labor are just not serious about anything. So, Madam Speaker, I don't know much what I can say on this topic anymore. I spoke at length about it yesterday. I've answered a number of questions in question time about this topic. I don't think Labor like hearing the truth, or they're actually not listening to what we are saying from this side of the House. But yes, I agree, Member for Catherine. I just don't think they're actually listening, because I've said on so many occasions that there was never any plan from the CLP to cease undergrounding of power before the election. Again, that is not true. The decision was made many months after the election, Madam Speaker. Yes, I made the decision on the advice from the experts. And it seems, obviously back in the day, that Labor weren't listening to the experts. So it looks like the opposition leader, through this motion, is continuing to try and gaslight Territorians about what their government was doing, or more precisely, Madam Speaker, what they actually weren't doing for the people in the northern suburbs on this particular topic. So to give, I suppose, as I finish up, to put a couple of things into perspective, Power and Water have provided some estimates on the costs of undergrounding power. Now they've had the time to go away and have, I suppose, a really good hard look at not just the equipment and material costs, but also the labour costs to doing it. So the estimates are based on current unit rates. So to underground HV is $2,260 per metre. That is the current estimate to do that. For low voltage, which is the stuff that we use in our houses, remember that LV and HV travel pretty well on the same poles. One's up the top, one's down the bottom. The low voltage underground installation is around about $2,120 a metre to put that power underground. Now, it's much cheaper when we're building a suburb or we're doing a subdivision and that planning is put in place at the outset. We can get that power underground. Of course, it is much cheaper to do it in that context. But when we have to come and do it post-installation, so when we have to come and dig trenches up through people's nature strips, go under roads, across roads and all these other things, change transformers and put them on the ground, that is where that cost increase, because it is doing the work afterwards. And again, Power and Water have gone away and done some excellent work on calculating what the actual metres and kilometres are of power lines, both HV and LV, within the northern suburbs. And currently the overhead HV length in the northern suburbs is 68.11 kilometres. That's how much HV there is in the northern suburbs. And the LV in the northern suburbs is 131.52 kilometres. So now we get a bit of an idea on why that cost is so high. I suppose these figures were probably made available to Labor, but yet again, they probably chose not to listen to them. They picked an arbitrary figure of, I said, they had $290 million, but they're only going to spend 60, and telling everybody that they were going to do it all for 60. Well, $60 million doesn't get you very much, Madam Speaker, when you look at those numbers. Well, you're right, Member for Barclay. They're just not honest. They don't listen. They are trying, again, to rewrite history. They're trying to gaslight Territorians and make themselves out to be something than they're not. Because they didn't listen to the people in the northern suburbs, as I said, and all of a sudden they're trying to win back the people out there in the northern suburbs through, I suppose, the only means that they have, which is something that they couldn't even do when they were in government. Over 20 years, the Labor Party has been in government, and in the last 8 years, they had the reins of power and they had the opportunity to kick this project off and chose not to. And, Madam Speaker, they didn't do it because they knew that their figures were wrong and they weren't going to be able to get it over the line for the money that they had.
Member for Daly.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. But before I start my contribution to this motion, I want to acknowledge my uncle up in the chamber behind the CLP members, Uncle Laurie. He's come all the way from Lismore and is heading out to 𝙎𝙃𝙈𝙍𝙏𝙁𝘼𝙈 Festival tomorrow, so welcome, and it's good to see you here with my brother as well there. I'm looking forward to seeing you after this, so welcome.
Welcome.
Madam Speaker, I find it completely hypocritical that the Treasurer comes in here and tells us that we're not listening to Territorians, when what we have over that side is a Treasurer that goes out fishing 1 week before his own budget has been handed down. He's not going out listening to Territorians. He's worried about fishing 1 week before his own budget was handed down. Yet, only 2 weeks ago, he was seen in Tennant Creek towing his boat, going fishing somewhere else. So 2 times this year, he's more worried about himself catching that barra than what Territorians want. And then only...
Please take your seat, Member for Daly. Point of order, Leader of Government Business. What is it?
This motion is about the northern suburbs of Darwin, and the relevance to the subject. He's talking about everything else but the subject at hand.
Look, all speakers are allowed some latitude, and it is in the early part of your speech, Member for Daly, so please continue.
Thank you. And this is completely relevant to the motion to the underground power in the northern suburbs, because the Treasurer is talking about listening to Territorians, but yet he's more worried about heading out fishing on his boat a week before the budget's handed down than only 2 weeks ago seen in Tennant Creek towing his boat around. And then only the other day, the NT News held their economic forum here in Darwin. You would think one of the key forum that the Treasurer should be at, and he's hiding away. He's hiding away. He couldn't even show up to the economic forum that the NT News held. So don't come in here and tell us that Labor are not listening to Territorians, because we're out every day listening to Territorians. We're not out fishing. We're not hiding away. We're not pretending that there's not issues in the community. So the Treasurer, I suggest to you, you get back to your budget book and you look at where you can help the people of the northern suburbs to ensure that we get power lines, underground power, in the northern suburbs. That's what the issue is here today, that the Treasurer is too busy worried about his fishing trips than Territorians. So please don't come in here telling us that we're not listening to Territorians. They don't like it, Madam Speaker. They don't like Deputy Speaker. They don't like the truth. And he's gone red now because he's been caught out. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, I do recognise the importance of rolling out the high voltage underground power to deliver reliable and safer electricity for residents, schools and businesses, particularly during the wet season in the northern suburbs, and condemning this CLP government for failing to tell Territorians before the 2024 election of its plan to scrap the 10-year program to bring underground power to the northern suburbs. So I do want to thank the Leader of the Opposition for bringing this important motion forward for people of the northern suburbs who want to see underground power for their suburbs. Mr Deputy Speaker, we've heard from the current CLP government, particularly the Treasurer, that it wasn't an election commitment. But that's not what this is about, Mr Deputy Speaker. It's not about a commitment, it's about their lack of credibility when it comes to being upfront with Territorians before an election. It's about Territorians deserving an honest, responsible government that keeps its fundamental commitment to keeping their communities safe, particularly during and after an emergency event. Scrapping this investment, Mr Deputy Speaker, leaves suburbs vulnerable during major storms such as Cyclone Marcus, which left 29,000 homes without power. It is truly a betrayal of trust for thousands of Darwin residents and families because the CLP government were not going to, into the election, say they would cut this project. Last night we heard the Minister for Infrastructure stand and ask, can Territorians blame the CLP government for walking away from this? Well, Mr Deputy Speaker, I think they can and I think they will. When the CLP announced they would scrap this vital program, Territorians were gobsmacked, absolutely gobsmacked. And I've been out speaking to residents in the northern suburbs, and this is one of the issues that they bring up. So I would hope that the member for 𝙎𝙃𝙈𝙍𝙍 is going out and telling his constituents that they've scrapped the underground power, that they're scrapping the underground power. He hasn't gone out and spoken to his constituents of 𝙎𝙃𝙈𝙍𝙍, which is a real shame. You've scrapped the underground power network for the northern suburbs.
Order. Can I remind people, direct your comments through the chairs, and member for 𝙎𝙃𝙈𝙍𝙍, let the member for Daly speak in silence.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. But not only that, we also had Territorians such as John Graham and David Taylor, who spoke to the ABC News on the 6th of November last year following the CLP's scrapping of the program. And I state what Mr Graham said. The lack of fans and no aircon just means, especially at night time, trying to sleep is really, really hard. End quote. Oh, sorry. Mr Graham then went on to say, there were 5 of us in the house and we were all suffering. While Mr Taylor said, you could say it was fine by candlelight for a couple of nights, but after 6, 7, 8 nights, it starts to really wear thin. Wear thin, Mr Deputy Speaker, something Territorians are coming to do with this CLP government's cheap rhetoric and political slogans. Mr Taylor also went on to say, it was hot as haze, it was bad and very humid after the cyclone. Mr Deputy Speaker, these are just 2 experiences from the media report, but we know that there are many more Territorians who would say the same. Territory Labor stands with those residents, families and small businesses across Darwin's northern suburbs on this issue because they deserve a secure electricity power supply. And it's a shame that there's members over that side that think it's funny and laughing in the face of those residents of the northern suburbs. I would hope that the member for Katherine is going to get out and speak to them because she seems to think that it's quite funny that people in the northern suburbs will not be getting under power lines.
Order.
Oh, look, he's upset the member for 𝙎𝙃𝙈𝙍𝙍. He can't handle it.
Leader of the Opposition, point of order.
I know that power means a lot and it's obviously going to the heads of the CLP, but Standing Order 20, no interruption, please, Mr Deputy Speaker.
You're correct, and I will remind all members, please do not interject. Let the member for Daly speak in silence. We had the Treasurer speak, be heard in silence. Let the member for Daly be heard.
Point of order, please.
Leader of the Government Business.
Standing Order 18, the member for Daly is directing his commentary at other members rather than through the Speaker.
And I've reminded him of that, and I will remind him again. Through the chair, please.
I've been going through the chair. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. So, as I said, Territory Labor stands with those residents, families and small businesses across Darwin's northern suburbs on this issue because they deserve a secure electricity power supply. On one hand, we should not be shocked, Mr Deputy Speaker, because the former CLP government scrapped the underground power program in 2012 when they came to office. Cutting is in their DNA. But what is shocking, Mr Deputy Speaker, is the fact that they did this to residents their MLAs now represent. I wonder how they feel about explaining that to the residents, member for 𝙎𝙃𝙈𝙍𝙍. We've all experienced a power outage, Mr Deputy Speaker. It's those opposite who will have to take the blame when Territorians' patient wears thin with the CLP government, which refused to deliver certainty during a crisis. Certainty for small businesses that could lose thousands of dollars. For families who already struggle to put food on the table, lose it because the fridge isn't working, and for seniors whose medicines need to be stored in a cool place. So, Minister for Infrastructure, I think yes, that during the next cyclone, that brings down power lines and leaves Territorians without power. They can and will blame this CLP government for not continuing the program. Territorians are also aware that the CLP struggles with the concept surrounding climate change. And what did we see at estimates? Do you remember, Leader of the Opposition, what we saw at estimates around climate change? We had a Minister for Lands, Planning and Environment, Mr Josh Boygoin. When he was asked what is the definition of climate change, he had to Google it. He had to Google it. He didn't even know the definition of climate change. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, with a changing climate, we know and are told consistently that natural disasters are happening more frequently and more harshly, causing more damage more often and at a greater and greater cost. Instead of having a vision for Territory's future and moving forward with the 3-year plan to build a more resilient power network, they are left with a lack of direction because they scrapped it. That is the issue here, Mr Deputy Speaker. Years of design, procurement and consultation were scrapped without warning or without any notice. The question is, Mr Deputy Speaker, if not when? We cannot keep going for a start and stop, fund and cut, plan and scrap mentality when it comes to the long-term vision of the Territory, because it's only going to become more and more expensive as we move ahead. Territorians deserve certainty surrounding their essential services, Mr Deputy Speaker, now and into the future. The CLP claims this saves money, but in reality, it is Territorians who will be paying the price when the next cyclone hits. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Member for Daly. Next speaker. Member for Arafura.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise to support the important motion brought forward by the Leader of the Opposition and to speak on behalf of many Territorians, not just in Darwin and Northern Suburbs, but across the top end, who know exactly what it means when CLP governments fail to invest in basic infrastructure. I represent the electorate of Arafura and communities right across West Arnhem and Tiwi Island regions who have had more of their fair share of cyclones over the years. We know exactly what it means when government fails to invest in proper preparation. We know what it means when power goes out for days, when families lose food, when elders and babies suffer through heat without fans and aircon. And we know what it means when there's no safe place to go during a storm. Because when you live in a cyclone-prone part of the world, you don't get to ignore the weather. You don't get to pretend the next storm won't come. You prepare, you invest, you build resilience. And that's what Underground Power Project was all about. Labor's plan to underground high-voltage power lines in Nakara, Waggaman and Alawa was a sensible staged investment. It was about protecting families, schools and businesses. It was about learning from Cyclone Marcus, when almost 29,000 homes lost power, and making sure that it doesn't happen again. It was a smart staged investment in safety, and it was already underway. But what did Territorians get from the CLP government? Silence. Before the election, the CLP scrapped the entire project, $60 million of investment in safer, more reliable power, without a word to the public before the election. They're making tough choices and looking for budget savings. But let's be real, Deputy Speaker. They didn't save money, they dumped a vital safety project, and they did it without a plan to replace it. It means more people in the northern suburbs of Darwin will be left vulnerable when the next big cyclone hits. It means longer blackouts, more spoiled food, more sweltering nights without fan or air condition, more pressure on our emergency services. it sends a message to every community across the territory that when the CLP needs to cut, they'll cut things that keep you safe. Can you believe they ran an election on safer territory, Deputy Speaker? This does not fit with what they promise. They scrapped this project just like they scrapped ranger funding, just like they walked away from my the health services in my electorate, and they want to believe it's just an accounting decision. They even pulled money from last year's budget for the McNamara cyclone shelter. They must be banking on a couple of quiet cyclone seasons. Meanwhile, this is not just numbers on a page, this is real people, real home, real lives. We know what happens when power and infrastructure fails. We've seen it across the territory. And if you don't build for the future, you will pay. And if you don't build for the future, you will pay for it later, with longer outages, higher repairs, costs, and more harm to families and businesses. That's why Labor committed to this project in the first place. It was a start to a bigger plan. 13 suburbs were aligned to follow up. It was about doing the work steadily and responsibly, step by step. Labor understands what's at stake. That's why we made the commitment to underground power. That's why we funded it. And that's why we've delivered underground power schools across Darwin, including the northern suburbs, so kids would at least be safe if cyclone came through. And it's what will keep fighting, and that's why we'll keep fighting to get the project back on track. Because when the next big storm hits, and it will, the cost of doing nothing will be felt in every home that goes dark, every family left in the heat and humidity, every business that loses stock, and every community like McNamara that's left waiting for cyclone shelters and essential services. And that will be on UMOP, so I hope UMOP are ready for it. Deputy Speaker, the people of Darwin and Northern Suburbs deserve better, and so do all Territorians who expect their government to keep them safe, plan ahead, and deliver on its words. Thanks.
Thank you, Member for Arafura. Are there any further speakers? Member Sanderson.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I rise to contribute to this motion on the undergrounding of power in Darwin's northern suburbs. The opposition's motion today is, unsurprisingly, another attempt to rewrite history and mislead Territorians, something they perfected in government and continue to do in opposition. This motion accuses the 𝙎𝙃 government of scrapping a project. In reality, there was no project to scrap, only a wish list of unfunded promises that Labor never had the money to deliver. Let's take a moment to walk through the facts, not the fiction opposition is peddling. In 2018, Labor announced a grand plan, 290 million to fully underground power across 13 suburbs. That sounded impressive, but Territorians were never told where that money was coming from. It was an announcement without a business case, without proper funding, and without a real delivery plan. By 2022, that 290 million promise had shrunk to 60 million, not for full undergrounding, but only for high voltage lines, and not for all 13 suburbs, but supposedly across them over six years. By early 2024, even that was watered down further. The same 60 million now covered only 3 suburbs, Nakara, Wogaman, and Larrakia, and only the high voltage network. Nothing for low voltage lines to homes, nothing for other 10 suburbs. And today, Power and Water's own advice is clear. To underground the entire network would cost between $750 million and $1 billion, far beyond Labor's 60 million fantasy. This is the Labor legacy: big talk, small delivery, and zero honesty. Labor members are standing here today pretending that we somehow ripped a working project out of the ground. People in Wogaman, my electorate, know this firsthand. They were told their suburb was next in line. They were given the impression that undergrounding to every household was coming soon. Yet even when Labor were in power, no such program existed. There was never a plan to deliver to individual homes. high voltage only, and only to 3 suburbs. To now accuse this government of scrapping something that was never funded, never scoped, and never scheduled is disingenuous at best and dishonest at worst. If Labor was serious, they had 6 years to act. They didn't. Instead, they left Territorians with false hope and a 290 million promise that magically shrank to 60 million and then to a 3-suburb pilot. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the opposition still refuses to acknowledge the reality. You cannot fund a 1 billion project on a 60 million allocation. You cannot promise 13 suburbs and then quietly scale back to 3 without coming clean to Territorians. And you cannot blame this government for reprioritizing unfunded Labor wish list when we inherited the books they left behind. This government is focused on projects we can afford, we can fund, and we can deliver. We are making targeted investments that improve safety and reliability without misleading people about what is possible. In 2019, they promised 10 million a year from 2021, yet by 2024, even their scaled-down plan was unfunded beyond 3 suburbs. And they went to the 2024 election knowing full well they could not afford full undergrounding, but never told Territorians the truth. If anyone should be condemned for failing to tell Territorians about undergrounding power, it is the opposition. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this motion is nothing more than a desperate attempt by the opposition to distract from their own failures. They had 6 years to underground power. They promised 290 million, changed to 60 million, and even that was never costed. They misled Waggaman and other 12 northern suburbs about what was possible. This government will not play that game. We are committed to reliable and safe power, but we will do it honestly, transparently, and responsibly. I reject this motion and call on opposition to finally come clean with Territorians about their record of empty promises and financial mismanagement. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Member for Sanderson. Any further speakers? Member for Casuarina.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, just want to speak against this motion that just came to Parliament and a lot of lies that Labor has brought. I don't want to speak now. I wanted to speak now. So Labor's promise was never real. Let's be very clear. Labor promise, the word was $60 million, does not exist in Northern Suburbs. Labor didn't even deliver anything in Northern Suburbs. As the press released, as Minister said, the work in Nakara was supposed to commence in 2023 to 2024. Who was in power at that time? What happened? Nothing was done. And now you're coming after when CLP came in and asking for the same project, which is not even viable to do in Northern Suburbs. As if you do even the maths, 68.11 kilometers in a high voltage, how are you going to do that one? They didn't even include the low voltage underground. They didn't even budget full connections to homes. And they didn't even explain that 60 million would barely scratch the surface in Northern Suburbs. It was false promise. It was just a headline, not a plan. And now they accuse the CLP of scrapping it. When in reality, Labor never funded it to begin with. CLP approach was always honest, it's responsible, and is deliverable. When the CLP came into government, we reviewed Labor's infrastructure pipeline, and what did we find? A long list of underfunded, unrealistic projects. This underground power plant being one of the worst. So we made the responsible decision to reprioritize. That does not mean we don't believe in underground power. It means we believe in being honest about what we can afford and delivering what we commit to. We are focusing our energy on projects that improve safety, grow the economy, and build up the territory. We will not continue with Labor's fantasy infrastructure, where promises are made without budgets, timelines, or any genuine intent to deliver. Let's have an honest conversation with the community. Mr. Deputy Speaker, if you want to have a real conversation about underground power, let's do it right way. Let's talk about it, the actual cost involved, the benefits to community safety and resilience, the funding sources, whether that's anti-revenue or federal support or costing sharing models, and the stage plan that doesn't pretend we can do it all at once, because underground power is worthwhile investment. I do not disagree, but only if it's done properly, planned, transparently, and explained honestly to the public. What we won't do it is go back to Labor's old playbooks of promising everything and delivering nothing, and blaming others for their mess. In conclusion, I'll just finish it up. I've just had enough, I think. Infrastructure built on the truth. In closing, Mr. Deputy Speaker, underground power is important. It is expensive, up to $1 billion or full rollout, for a full rollout, and it deserves a real plan, not political fantasy. The CLP will always be honest with Territorians. We'll make responsible decisions, and we will keep delivering real outcomes, not just press release. Labor failed to tell the truth about the cost, and we won't make that mistake. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Member for Casuarina. Any further speakers? Member for Fanny Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I wasn't going to speak on this one, but I thought I'd just jump up and say a few words. I won't take too much of your time. To be honest, I'm just absolutely gobsmacked that the Labor government are choosing to prioritise this in this time, in general business time. We've spoken so many times in this parliament about. We've spoken so many times in this parliament about underground power, and we've exposed what the Labor government did to Territorians in promoting what they couldn't deliver. So I'm absolutely gobsmacked that they're bringing this back again so that we can tell them that they made mistakes again. Territory Labor said in some of their speeches that they stand with the people of the northern suburbs. Clearly they don't stand with the people of the northern suburbs. Our government stands with the people of the northern suburbs. I've spoken to so many constituents. In the last year, or nearly a year, only one constituent has come to me and said that they were disappointed that the undergrounding power did not happen in the Fanny Bay electorate, which includes the Gardens, Parap, Ludmilla, Fanny Bay and Coconut Grove. They're the electorates that are impacted by this. Only one person has come and said that they were upset by it. And you know what? When I explained to them the reason as to why this program was cancelled, they completely accepted that decision. They said, of course we need to make decisions that are in the best interest for Territorians, but we also need to make decisions that are in the best interest for our children and our grandchildren, because they don't want to be paying back $1 billion debt in the future. The member for Arafura made the comment that our government cuts things that keep Territorians safe. That is the absolute worst comment I've heard all day. We are doing everything to keep Territorians safe. We have delivered a record budget for police, emergency services, corrections services. We've delivered that for Territorians to keep them safe, and they completely understand why we have cut the underground power. So anybody that tells you from that side of the chamber that they stand with people of the northern suburbs, none of them live or work in the northern suburbs. They all live and work out bush. They don't speak to the people in the northern suburbs. Therefore, they don't know what they're thinking. So they can't stand in this chamber and pretend that they know what's happening. This government will absolutely stand with all Territorians, and we will make the best decision for Territorians, but for the economy as well, so that our children and grandchildren are not paying for the mistakes that could have been made. Underground power is absolutely important, and it deserves proper consideration, proper conversation, proper debate, and the chance to get up. At the moment, we cannot afford to do it because we're in a massive mess because of what we were left with. So we need to make cuts. Everybody in this chamber that has spoken today on this side has agreed with that and said that. We're responsible and we want to be fiscally responsible. So we won't make decisions that throw the future generations under the bus. Just one last thing before I finish up. Labor have been in government for 19 out of the last 25 years. They didn't make any progress on this. They decided to run with it as an election campaign, and they knew that they could not deliver. They don't stand with Territorians. We do, and we're working every day to make it safer for Territorians. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Member for Fanny Bay. Any further speakers? No further speakers. I call on the Leader of the Opposition to close.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I do thank the members of the chamber who contributed to the motion, and I thank the member for Namatjira, the member for Nightcliff, the member for Johnston, the member for Daly, the member for 𝙎𝙃𝙈𝙈𝙀𝙈, the member for Sanderson, the member for Casuarina, and the member for Fanny Bay. Mr Deputy Speaker, it's interesting how much energy people get when they get fired up about protecting the legacy of their team and being drawn out to speak on something they weren't already considering was important for their electorate, for their very own electorate, even though, as I mentioned, every single one of the 13 suburbs that were named in the program, the 10-year program, not a 3-year program, not a 2-year program, not a 1-year program, the 10-year program that was planned out by the experts, by Power and Water Corporation, by the engineers, that was planned out over a 10-year period. Every single one of those suburbs are in CLP members' electorate. So it was great to see people who stood to contribute, though apparently wasn't an issue or a topic at all that they had considered for their electorate prior to being prompted or fired up, which is great. You know, that's all about democracy, firing up to make a contribution on behalf of your electorate. So I do thank all of those members who contributed. Mr Deputy Speaker, there's a few contributions which I'd like to specifically comment on, and just in terms of the processes that they understand or perhaps that they have fabricated to make their speech sound better. It was gold. We heard from the member for Namatjira, the Treasurer of the Northern Territory, Bill Yan. And I think I will bask in the glory of this one, Mr Deputy Speaker, when the Hansard comes out this evening. And I will quote, the quote of the day for anyone who wasn't listening carefully to the member for Namatjira was, "Why would we ignore the experts?" Bill Yan has said that tonight, Mr Deputy Speaker, in front of everyone from the chamber, for Hansard, for all to see and read forevermore, infinity. Why would we ignore the experts? It appears, Mr Deputy Speaker, that Bill Yan, the Treasurer of the Northern Territory, is selective with his CLP team, with the CLP ministers in particular, the Cabinet of the CLP, only listen to the experts when it suits them. Quote of the day, probably quote of the week, probably quote of the month, probably quote of the year from Bill Yan, the member for Namatjira. Thank you so much for providing that quote. Why would we ignore the experts? So I would pose the question to the CLP government, to the backbenchers, to the ministers, all 17 members. Why would you ignore the experts when it comes to justice? Why would you ignore the experts when it comes to domestic, family and sexual violence prevention in the Northern Territory? Why would you ignore the experts when it comes to education policy around attendance and engagement? Why would you ignore the experts when it comes to making a difference in the Territory? Why would you ignore the experts, our police force, who are asking for their pay to be increased because their workloads and the complexities of their work are increased? Why would you ignore the experts, CLP government? Quote from Bill Yan, your Treasurer, the man with the money. Why would you ignore the experts? Why don't you ask yourselves that? Thank you, member for Namatjira. Mr Deputy Speaker, the member for Fanny Bay wants me to wrap it up. That's how important this issue is to Territorians from a member of government, from the 13 suburbs that the CLP members cover as their electorate. Wrap it up. We don't want to hear about anything that's to do with our electorate. Wrap it up. We don't care about the northern suburbs. Wrap it up. I don't have time for you to talk about the important issues that Territorians have brought to you as the opposition. Wrap it up. I have disrespect for Territorians. Thank you, Member for Fanny Bay. Probably not your finest hour, so I won't make that the quote of the day, absolutely not. But I do have a quote, Mr Deputy Speaker, from the Member for Fanny Bay. People understand why we cut the program. There it is. The member for Fanny Bay has undermined every single CLP minister in this chamber by admitting that the CLP cut. They have started to go back to their own DNA, Mr Deputy Speaker, in less than 12 months of governing. 11 months, in fact. The CLP has already started to cut. It has now become part of their language to cut. It is now part of their mentality. They're now proudly and openly showing their DNA that the CLP cut when it comes to important programs, policies, funding for the Territory. Thank you, Member for Fanny Bay, for your contribution tonight. The CLP cut. So that's not a wrap yet, because I've got another one for you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And I do appreciate that the member for 𝙎𝙃𝙈𝙇 contributed, because we did talk about quite a few suburbs in the electorate that he represents. I was quite astounded by this one. The CLP will always be honest with Territorians. Mr Deputy Speaker, it's very selective with the honesty of what we have seen so far with the CLP government and what they tell or don't tell Territorians. The CLP will always be honest with Territorians. Thank you, Member for 𝙎𝙃𝙈𝙇. It's either you're now going to turn a new leaf and completely change your DNA from the cutting and be honest with Territorians, changing from the lies, or, unfortunately, maybe the member for 𝙎𝙃𝙈𝙇 is not aware of the many dishonest, untrue things that the CLP, his team, have done in the last 11 months. And I would be happy to send all the Hansard from the last 11 months of Parliament, where we have outlined the continuous dishonesty and work of the CLP to try and cover up their tracks when they lie, when the CLP lies to Territorians, when they're dishonest to Territorians. There are many, many examples, Mr Deputy Speaker. So whilst I honestly believe that the member for 𝙎𝙃𝙈𝙇 has a good heart and is absolutely a great person, I do not agree or believe that the CLP government that he's a part of is honest. No way, shape or form. So I will respectfully disagree with your views there, member for 𝙎𝙃𝙈𝙇, and I hope that you go away and speak to your electorate about some of those dishonest announcements or lack of announcements, information or lack of information, that your CLP government has chosen to or chosen not to present to Territorians. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, it has been a really great opportunity for me to hear from members of the chamber, particularly government members of the chamber, of what they think about the motion that I put forward on behalf of my Labor team. And then the disregard, the disrespect, the lack of understanding around why when we live in, when our capital city, when we live in the top end in particular, but when our capital city is in a cyclone-prone context, weather environment, severe weather environment, how it affects the people that we all represent, but particularly those in the northern suburbs, in those 13 suburbs that we outlined that were part of a 10-year plan, not a 3-year plan. Why didn't you do this 2 years ago? No, a 10-year plan provided by the experts, the engineers, and those who have worked on this for a long time. And yes, it could have happened faster, but it was done properly. The planning and the design was done properly. And thank the member for Namatjira for tabling my media release from the last term. That was helpful because I actually had it in front of me, so I'm glad that he was able to do that, and or whoever from his office has done his work for him, because that's what he relies on, other people do his work. But, Mr Deputy Speaker, to be able to highlight the lack of regard and respect from the CLP members for their own electorates. None of the opposition have any of those suburbs. None of the opposition represent the people in those 13 suburbs, but the lack of disrespect and regard is something that I really, really hope those Northern Suburbs constituents are not afraid to bring up with the CLP government, because they've already cut the program and they've got nothing else to lose. So I would also like to point out the member for Namatjira laboured the point that the project was not decided before the election, which is why it didn't come up in their pre-budget election. And he spoke about the timing around this. He said, oh, many months later, but he said it was 6 weeks later. So Treasurer doing the maths, 6 weeks to me is a month and a half. It's a month and a bit, not months, many months later. We had the member for Daly speak about some quotes from November after the announcement, etc. But I do want to highlight there was an article on the 16th of August, a couple of days before the Territory election last year, 2024, by Camden Smith of the Northern Territory News, speaking about the reaffirmation, the confirmation that if a re-elected Territory Labor government was to come to power post the Territory general election last year, that we would continue that work around the high voltage underground power. And it was an article written in the NT News. And the very last line, I will table this, Mr Deputy Speaker, to make sure I'm transparent and open about where I'm quoting, and I do have the link for Hansard in here, and I'll send it to them electronically. The last line after the article by Mr Smith was, quote, the opposition Country Liberal Party has been contacted for comment, end quote. So they couldn't even be bothered a couple of days before the election to comment on would they keep the project. So to me, sorry, member for Casuarina, but I do not trust your party before in what they were going to say face to face. So that line there by the NT News leads me to believe that it was already on the books and ready for cut, like the member for Fanny Bay said, cut the program well and truly before the Territory election results were in. Mr Deputy Speaker, I appreciate the opportunity to present my motion for the General Business Day before the House, and I will commend the motion to the House.
Thank you, Leader of the Opposition. The question is the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye, to the contrary no. Aye. I think the noes have it.